Hi, this is Environmental Chemistry at Valdosta State University. Our project in this course is to make a large number of analytical measurements involving chemical and physical parameters surrounding the springs in North Florida. These world-renowned springs are noted for their clarity and purity. Contamination in these springs is becoming a bigger issue as the population in the southeast soars. We have made hundreds of biological, chemical, and physical measurements and will summarize them in this video.
The springs of North Florida were gathering places for Native Americans. The springs were sources of cool, unspoiled water for people hunting, fishing, and gathering from the surrounding woods. Today, the springs can be used as a glimpse into the current and future health of our water supply. Droughts and nutrient loading from agriculture impact the quality of water. Many aspects of life in South Georgia and North Florida are tied to the quality and quantity of fresh water available.
This picture represents Valdosta State University's Environmental Chemistry class, summer 2007. Valdosta is located in South Georgia, just above the Georgia-Florida state line. The class is composed of both biology and chemistry majors. This presentation will focus on the effects of chemical molecules such as nitrates and phosphates on the environment. These chemicals, as well as others, can cause serious damage to the environment. We will also discuss how many of the animals unique to Florida and the Southeast may be affected by these pollutants. Two different test procedures were used to measure water quality at all locations.
The inland springs that we studied include Jenny Springs, Peacock Springs, Telford Spring, and Little River. We also studied Lanark Spring, which is located in the Gulf of Mexico.
The Floridian Aquifer is the largest, oldest, and deepest aquifer in the southeastern United States. It is important because it extends into parts of Florida, southern Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. The Floridian Aquifer provides a water source for several large cities that include Savannah, Jacksonville, Tallahassee, and Orlando, Florida. It also supplies water to other rural areas of these states. The Floridian Aquifer is composed primarily of limestone that is largely of the mineral calcite, calcium carbonate. This aquifer is distinct because it has three layers that include the upper layer, the middle confined unit, and the lower layer. An aquifer is underground porous rock that holds water and allows water to move throughout its holes. Aquifers are composed of earthen materials such as your sand, shells, and limestone. It contains both fresh and salt water. As you can see from the picture to the right, there are several components of an aquifer. The first component is the confined aquifer. Typically, the confined aquifer is shallow and has an upper boundary called the water table. The second component is the confined aquifer. It stores water that is isolated from air by clay or shale. A spring is a place where groundwater discharges through natural openings in the ground. Springs form as a result of the pressure from percolating water that exits the aquifer. Numerous springs are found throughout the southeastern United States. The average temperature of water in the springs is 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Spring water has been identified as an ideal freshwater habitat for plant and animal life. Some common plant and animals found within the waters include fish, crayfish, algae, and seashells. Spring water has a very clear visibility up to 150 feet. Many industrial companies pump water out of springs and use it as a source of drinking water. Springs are also used for recreational purposes. Both the temperature and atmosphere are ideal environments for vacationers.
This map shows the land area of the Suwannee River Basin, located in South Georgia and North Florida. Valdosta State University can be found within the South Georgia portion of the basin. The Suwannee River and its tributaries of rivers and springs make up the waterway of this basin and is part of the Floridian aquifer system.
The spring head is often a cave or a large crack in the limestone bed. Millions of gallons of clear, fresh water escape the aquifer each day at any particular spring. The spring head feeds a spring run that will empty into a nearby river, such as the Santa Fe or Suwannee. Shells, otters, snakes, hawks, eagles, deer, wild boar, spiders, and bears are some of the wildlife that live in the woods around the springs. If the water is not stirred up by swimmers or divers, underwater visibility can be 100 to 150 feet.
Fertilizers are composed of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These fertilizers are used in agriculture to enhance the growth of plants. On a bag of fertilizer there are three important numbers. The first one refers to the nitrogen percentage, second to the phosphorus percentage, and a third to the percentage of potassium. The increase of nitrate concentrations can cause algae blooms and also an increase of plant life. This can use up the dissolved oxygen and kill the plants and animals that live in the water. Nitrates are not directly harmful, but they can react with bacteria to form nitrite. Overexposure to nitrate can cause a rare disease called blue baby syndrome.
Jenny Springs is located in Central Florida on the Santa Fe River. The Santa Fe River runs across Central Florida and into the Suwannee River. The three main springs are Jenny Springs, Devil's Eye, and Dogwood Spring. All three springs are open for recreational purposes and scuba diving. People come from all over the world to swim in these amazing caves. Jenny Springs is the largest of the three caves, but divers are only allowed to penetrate to certain depths due to deaths in the past.
Here we have a closer image of three springs adjacent to the Santa Fe River. In this image, the river flows from right to left, joins with the Suwannee River, and empties into the Gulf of Mexico. The springs from right to left are the Devil Spring System, Jenny Spring, and Dogwood Spring. Water from the Floridian aquifer passes through these springs, then through a stream or spring run into the Santa Fe River.
This picture represents the Santa Fe River and its springs. Note the locations of each spring.
Pollutants such as human and animal sewage, thermal pollution, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and so forth from agricultural, industrial, and residential developments can enter the river and local water supply. These can have negative impacts on water quality for plant and animal life as well as humans. pH is the measure of acidity or alkalinity of a solution. If a solution has a pH of 7, it is considered neutral. If it has a pH less than 7, it is considered acidic, and a pH greater than 7 is considered basic. Each of the labeled sites on the map depict where measurements of pH were taken. The average pH of the springs and the Santa Fe River was 7.03. The average temperature of the springs is reported to be 72 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. In May 2007, our measurements revealed an average of 73.7 degrees Fahrenheit directly over the springs. Factors that could have affected our measurements include water depth and direct sunlight.
Here, a student is using a refractometer. A refractometer is used to measure salt concentrations in parts per thousand and specific gravity of a water sample. A pure water sample has a salt concentration of 0 parts per thousand and a specific gravity of 1. Typically, the salt concentration of the ocean is 35 parts per thousand and has a specific gravity of 1.026.
Conductivity is the measure of a material's ability to conduct an electrical current. The conductivity was lower in the springs than in the river. Our measurements of conductivity range from 315 to 398 millisiemens. We tested for the presence of nitrates not only in the Santa Fe River and springs, but also in the soil surrounding them. Minerals and pollutants can be deposited in the soil surrounding the river during times of high river levels and floods. Surprisingly, the nitrate levels were higher around the springs than in the river or in the soil samples. Possible sources could be industrial, agricultural, and residential developments near the river.
Increases in water plants and algae are due to an increase in nitrate levels.
This satellite image shows the proximity of Peacock Springs to the Suwannee River. The spring is located further from the river than those at Jenny Springs. The amount of water produced per day by Peacock Spring is also less than those. This can lead to a buildup of nutrients and pollutants in the spring.
This is a picture of Peacock Springs. Notice the extensive amounts of algae due to high amounts of nitrates in the water. This is a map of the 3 separate Peacock Springs. This shows the underground cave system that attracts divers to this area from all over the world.
We took surface samples from each of the 3 springs that make up the Peacock system. We were also able to obtain a sample from 100 feet inside the mouth of the cave and 47 feet below the surface of Peacock 1. This sample showed a higher ORP reading than that of the surface samples. This is likely due to the increased amount of dissolved oxygen inside the cave.
Using our technique with a lower detection limit of 0.5 parts per million, we did not measure any phosphates in the spring water. One reason for this is that phosphate in the water binds to a cation such as calcium and precipitates into the sediment as a solid. While this phosphate is still available to plants anchored in the sediment, its concentration in the spring and river waters are quite low.
Salinity and conductivity measurements around Lanark Spring showed that there was a sustained freshwater flow coming from the spring head. Measurements were also taken on Lanark Shoal that showed freshwater seepage through the dolomite base layer in several locations.
Lanark Spring is located in the Gulf of Mexico, approximately 500 meters off the coast of Lanark, Florida. Our class accessed the spring by boat and used the Florida State University Marine Lab facilities. Lanark Spring is the main spring in this area. Large amounts of freshwater seepage also pour through the sediment throughout this region from the Floridan aquifer. Lanark Springs is difficult to find unless the seas are very calm.
Although 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile out to sea, students waded over a shallow shoal off the coast of Lanark, Florida. The tree line of the shore is visible in the background. Walking over the shoal, students could detect cold spots of areas where the water temperature would be several degrees cooler than the surrounding area. Using techniques such as conductivity, ORP, and calcium hardness levels allowed us to determine that spring water was seeping through the limestone and dolomite covering. Approximately 10 years ago, researchers from Florida State University measured seepage closer to the shore and published their results. Perhaps a future source of freshwater will center on the capture of freshwater from seepage out of the aquifers before it mixes with salt water from the Gulf of Mexico. Marine and bird wildlife was abundant on the shoal, including a close encounter with a bull shark, a large ray, and some pelicans.
The team used GPS to locate Lanark Spring in the Gulf. The GPS was extremely important as there are no defining markers to determine the precise location of the spring.
Seagrass beds are found just below low tide mark. Most of the plant material produced is decomposed by fungi and bacteria while the nutrients are recycled. The seagrass beds slow the flow of water, causing deposition of silt in which worms and clams may burrow. The plants present a large surface area on which small algae grow, providing a nutritious source of food for browsing animals. The seagrass beds also shelter many small organisms from predators, and various species of fish lay their eggs close to seagrass beds so that the young fish can take advantage of this shelter.
Here we traveled by pontoon boat to Lanark Springs Shoal, approximately 2 miles off the shore of St. James Island. We traveled along the shallow waters using several different techniques to measure water quality. Over a range of about 200 yards, we observed a change in temperature along with other readings which provided evidence of water seepage from the spring in this area.
We had the opportunity to take a boat ride to Lanark Spring in the shoals. This picture represents students performing measurements for water quality. Wildfires began blazing in South Georgia and North Florida in early April 2007. The fires quickly spread to become the worst in each state's history. The smoke covered an area ranging from North Georgia to parts of South Florida. This is a satellite image of the fires as of May 11, 2007.
The smoke created by wildfire affects people with respiratory illnesses, plants, animals, and the overall quality of life in an area. The fires release carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and NOx compounds into the atmosphere. These compounds can react with water to create acid rain. Fires also release sodium and potassium dioxide, which can make the pH of the surrounding water basic. The spring systems of the Florida aquifer contain limestone and other dissolved organic materials that produce bicarbonate. The bicarbonate acts as a buffer for the pH and helps control the pH of the waterways.